Hey y'all, welcome and welcome back. If you are new here, that means that you have missed our first 5 episodes of our 13-part series counting down to Halloween, so go ahead and pause this video and backtrack and watch the others. Or I guess you could watch it after. It's not like it's in an order. Just make sure you watch the rest because they're all fantastic if I do say so myself. And the only reason I say that is because they're involving Appalachian folklore. For 13 days, we are going to be talking about nothing but Appalachian folklore, telling stories from this area, and maybe even showing a few clips or two. Now, today's video I'm actually really excited for because it is all about the beings that hide just behind the trees and maybe even pretend to be the trees themselves. Turn on a light for this one because these are going to get pretty creepy and it's really going to scare you into never looking into the trees again. You may look at them, but you'll never look into them. Now, if you encounter one of these beings, like most things that I have said throughout this entire course of 5 days, ignore it. Always ignore it, pretend you didn't see it, and get out of the area, and I would recommend getting inside if you're outside. You saw nothing strange, you heard nothing strange, nothing's going on, you just decided to go back inside. It's fine, you planned on doing that. Why is your heart beating so fast? Slow it down. Anyways, here are a few stories dealing with this exact situation. One night after work, I stayed at my friend's apartment. For this story to make sense, I must give quite a bit of background. The story takes place in Ohio, right outside of the Appalachian Mountains. She shared her apartment with 2 of her ex-boyfriends, A and J. That night, my ex-boyfriend, K, was also staying there. The layout of the apartment was that when you walked in, there was a kitchen on the right, stairs in the middle, living room on the left, up the stairs the bathroom was on the right, and the bedroom took up the rest of the space. The way it worked with that many people in that tiny apartment was in the living room there was a couch against the sliding glass door. This was done during a tornado scare weeks prior. A futon against the wall beside the couch and a bed upstairs. Kay and I were on the futon, Jay was on the couch, L and A were on the bed, and L also has a cat. Now on to the story. That night in question, after I got off from work, L and I needed to go to Walmart and Taco Bell, which was only a few minutes away. It was around 11:30. When we got back to the apartment, there were lights on in the trees behind the field. We turned my car lights off, thinking it was a neighbor. As soon as I turned the lights off in my car, those lights went away like a reflection. The distance between the 2 reflections we realized had to be eyes. There was no coyotes or wolves in that particular area. The eyes were too high up to be a cat, raccoon, or a possum. They were too straightforward to be a deer. There were no stray dogs around there. At around 4 o'clock in the morning, strange things started happening. L, K, J, and I all woke up to the cat screaming. L was upstairs with A, so J, K, and I all thought she or A rolled over onto the cat. L came downstairs and we noticed the cat was sitting in the window still screaming. J went and looked outside and nothing was there. We locked both the doors, made sure the sliding glass door was locked, and made sure all the windows were locked. After all that, we all woke up the next morning and talked about what happened. A was having sleep paralysis all of this time. Both A and L had seen shadow figures in their closet and in front of the bathroom. I have more stories about the times that I stayed with L, A, and J if you're interested. That is terrifying. So that's the situation. I don't think I said this in the monologue. So the beings in the trees, they pretend to be trees. So they have to be really tall and lanky and they're able to hide behind things. And that's usually how they look, but sometimes they look like other things, especially if it's something that can shapeshift. They can look like whatever. Why wouldn't it pretend to be an animal? All right, next story. About a week or 2 ago, I was in my backyard at night in the Appalachian Mountains. I'd heard the stories before about things and how I shouldn't say names, but I didn't really think anything would happen if I did, and I was just curious, so I did. Right after, everything went super quiet. No bugs, no wind, no nothing. Then I heard this low growl from the woods, and something started moving really fast towards the trees. I freaked out and ran back into my house as fast as I could. I got up to the porch steps and slammed the door just in time. I think whatever it was, I must made it inside. That night I kept hearing weird growling and something scratching outside. The creepiest part, I heard whistling. It sounded like it was going around the house, slow and steady. I haven't gone in the backyard after dark after that. Yep. Ugh. Alright, next story. The 2 paranormal experiences are not my experiences, but from 2 close people in my life, and it's most likely the same dark spirit. Okay, so this next story, it doesn't take place in Appalachia, but the folklore is very similar, so I included it. I did that with a few stories in this series, but you're still going to get the Appalachian vibes. A bit of backstory. I grew up in Hawaii on the island of Oahu, on the west side of the island where I'm away from all the tourist attractions. It's mostly country out here where the majority of my neighbors are farmers, and I live very far in one of the valleys. It looks really similar to the Appalachian Mountains. I practically lived out there the majority of my life and grew up learning all about the hauntings and superstitions that Hawaii holds, like the sightings of the fire god Pete, night marchers, and to never whistle at night or the ghost will get you, and more, but I never experienced any of it. But 2 close people in my life have experienced some paranormal activity regarding my neighbor's vacant property across the street and my family's property. The first one was a close friend of mine's, who I was living with at the time. My friend has the ability to see spirits everywhere she goes. Our place was away from the west side, so we took a drive out to my family's home that night. I had to grab a few things. When we got there, she walked into the house and immediately told me that she had to go back into her car. I didn't think anything of it, just assumed she was tired. As I got back into the car, her hands went over her face, and it stayed that way until we got home to our place. Once we were home, she mentioned that she saw a dark spirit that looked like a man, and it kept looking at her the entire time she was there. It was trying to get her attention from outside. I asked her where she saw the spirit, and she mentioned that she saw it across the street at the vacant property. The property across the street from my family's home has been vacant for a while. There's about 10 acres of land. The neighbors that lived there had passed away, and their children are trying to sell it. One of the family's homes is pretty close to the road, and there's a door that faces the road, and the first thing you'll see is the neighbor's long driveway. That night when my friend came over, the door that faces the vacant property was open, and that's when she saw the dark spirit in the neighbor's house. The dark spirit came across the street to my family's home and was watching her the whole time when we were there, and she ignored it. The second story. It's possibly related to the first one. This time it was my brother. For many years, when the neighbors across the street from us were still alive, our family helped them with freeing their cows and cutting their grass because they were elderly. Because we helped them so much, they offered a place for our cows to stay as well. We had our cows and horses across the street in their pasture. We'd leave them in their corral since they had the land for it. My brother grew up raising the cows and horses, so eventually he was the only one that goes there to take care of them since my grandfather was too old to do it. Even though the neighbors had passed on, the neighbors' adult children were okay with us keeping our animals on their land until they were able to sell it. It helped with keeping the grass low and not overgrown. So, with the lot being vacant and nobody lived there but the animals, my brother was the only person there. A couple of years after the first encounter with my close friend and the dark spirit, my brother was also experiencing something similar across the street. He told my grandma that he felt like something was watching him. He's out there when he's feeding the animals. He said he'll catch a shadow in his peripheral view, but debunked it as a wind whipping through the grass or something else. There's an old milk can that sits behind the house in the grass, and one day he saw something hide behind it when he turned back to look. He mentioned this to my grandma, and my grandma told this to my auntie, who's also gifted and able to see spirits. My auntie had been noticing something weird happening for a while also. She sensed a dark spirit that lurks on the vacant property and is just wandering around until my brother is there. My brother goes up to the pasture twice a day, one time in the morning and the second in the afternoon. The spirit doesn't bother him in the morning, but in the afternoon it follows. It hides behind trees while he watches my brother. My aunties mentioned that since doing this, the spirit follows my brother home every day, and when he comes into our house, it causes a negative energy in the home. Which all made sense as to why my grandfather has been so irate for the past couple of years with him screaming and arguing with my grandma. Now that we found out about the dark spirit, my aunt gave my brother instructions on what to do when he goes across the street. She told him that he needs to carry salt in his pockets, and he needs to toss some over his shoulder, some salt to sprinkle on top of his head, and say a little prayer and ask for peace. My brother has done this couple more years, and mayhem in our home has stopped. My grandparents barely argue, and my brother hasn't seen the shadow watching him, and he's felt better knowing that it feels protected. I have to say it's been less than 10 years since this happened, and the vacant property is now sold to another group of farmers that are from the church. Pretty sure when they bought it, the property had been blessed. I wish I knew the backstory of this dark spirit and why it's there to give more insight, but unfortunately no one knows. Since they bought the place, we haven't heard or seen any more of the dark spirit that lurks on that property. See what I mean, though? That just, itches the, urge for Appalachian content. I love that. Okay, that is terrifying, though. It does feel like something was guarding the land and maybe did not like the brother being there that late, which is very Appalachia core, and that's why I wanted to read it with this. Alright, next story. I was taking my dog outside for a walk, and we have this 4-kilometer, 2.5-mile route, which I chose to walk on. A part of this route went through a tiny forest, and I didn't think anything of it. That was until I heard a scary sound. I don't know what it was, but it sounded far away, but somehow sounded so close, and it was screaming. I think my dog heard it too because he was staring into the trees. Even though I wasn't able to see anything there, I still felt watched. I walked home as fast as possible, but still not running. Ever since then, I hear something scratching against my window. Do you know what it might have been and how I can get rid of it? I think I see something behind the trees. Okay. Same situation as before, ignoring it's always the best. Black salt on your windowsills is great to keep you protected, and iron stakes on the four corners of your property are also really good. But literally the best thing you can do for these things is just ignore it and to not feed it attention. Okay, I think we have time for one more story, and this one's super long, so. I've been watching your content for a while now, and I thought I'd share my stories. I apologize for the length and possible rambling. I'm a 52-year-old mom of an adult son. My partner, 52, also lives with us. So I've lived in southwestern part of Virginia, the Appalachian Blue Ridge Mountains, for most of my life, and there's been some strange stuff around me since I was a kid. Can confirm, also live here. Weird stuff. First, when I was a toddler, my mom told me this story. My dad was rarely home. He worked 3 jobs, so mostly when we did see him, he was sleeping. Mom was home with me alone when she had to run to the bathroom. I was crying because I wanted to get into the bedroom to get my toys. I was a tiny toddler and couldn't reach the doorknob. Mom said she would let me in when she was done and she would get my toys down from the closet shelf and we'd play. She was done in the bathroom, and then she said when she came out, I was in my bedroom. The light was on and I was happily playing with toys, but there was no way I could have reached them. I couldn't even open the closet door at that point. She said she asked me how I got my toys, and I just smiled and pointed to the corner. There wasn't anyone there. Same apartment. A few weeks later, Mom was woken up by a blood-curdling scream. She came running to the bathroom where I was huddled in the corner sobbing, my heart out. She asked what was going on and thought I was hurt. She said I kept my eyes covered and just pointed at the mirror while screaming and sobbing. The man! The scary man! Again, she saw nothing. There was other stuff, some she refused to share. When I was around 13, we'd moved several times. I was a messed up kid. Trauma in one of the places we'd lived in, severe bullying and torture, among other things that aren't necessary for the story. Stay out of the really tiny towns if you weren't born there. Kids are mean. So I had some pretty messed up mental health with panic attacks, depression, PTSD, and other stuff. In our new house, in a little subdivision full of these similar buildings, lots of things happened, one of which was my shadow man. I'd wake up and he'd be there, standing in the corner. He looked like a man-shaped shadow that was just darker than the other shadows. I always had a nightlight. Fear of the dark was strong then. I never could see a face or defining features, but he was a 3-dimensional looking shadow that would either stand in the room or he'd walk around from side to side, just like he was passing through. The nights he watched were eerie, but because he wasn't doing anything, I wasn't too scared. I told my mom and she talked it up to my vivid imagination. I remember one night I had a weird dream that I could still hear screaming, like a crowd of people just screaming far away. It was terrifying, and suddenly myself was grabbed and shaken, like something had their hands inside my chest. I don't know how to describe it properly. I woke up staring into a blacker than black shadow, head and body bent over, my hands outstretched. I screamed. My mom came running in and I was already up and out of bed. He was gone, but I'd been awake when I saw him. Trust me, no one can feel that cold adrenaline spike and still be sleeping. My mom swore I was just dreaming. Then a few weeks later, I was moving my bedroom into a different room, but for now I lived on the sofa in the living room. My mom's best friend came to stay for a couple of days. She took my old bedroom since I was sleeping on the sofa. Mom said late that night her friend woke up. She was pale and sweating. She told her, "I don't want to scare the kids, but there's something in her room," and went to describe my shadow man. He apparently was standing in the doorway and she had to run through him to leave, braver than me. My mom stopped doubting me. Other stuff happened in that house. Not sure why. It was a fairly new house, maybe less than a decade old when we lived there. Because these shadow beings are attached to land, not houses here. I firmly believe, she wrote more, but I'm like sidestepping to talk. I firmly believe that these shadow beings most of the time are just there to protect land, kind of like cemetery guardians. Like they're just wanting to protect land. If you respect nature, they'll leave you alone. But some of them, I don't know. I think some of them have a different agenda. Now present day, my home has issues and I live with my partner and son, like I said, right near the Blue Ridge Parkway. Lots of pretty trees, especially in the fall. When we moved in, the lady who'd owned it before us had passed, so we got a good deal on it. She loved flowers in her yard. The yard was full of irises from all over the world. I'm allergic to the outdoors, hay fever, so I couldn't keep up with them. One day I was sitting on the couch and my parents were visiting. I was on the side of the couch and my mom was on the other. My mom pinched me on my upper arm hard. I spun my head around and yelled at her. And I asked her why she did that. She was not even looking in my direction. She turned her head and looked really confused. She was too far away and strikingly denied doing anything. Then we both watched in horror as my arm immediately started to bruise and well up. Mom was joking and said, "That dead lady's name is mad at you and for digging up her irises." I apologized and explained to the empty air and never got pinched again. She did other things though. Little stuff like a basketball that had been in the bedroom went bouncing through the kitchen when I was home alone on the computer. Lately though, I've had some stranger stuff. I've seen the back of my 6'3" son standing in the bedroom doorway. The first time he wasn't even home, and the second time a few days ago I didn't even have my glasses on. I'm blind without them, and heard him say in his pissy voice, "Mom," like he'd been trying to get my attention. And then the rattle, like he was drumming his fingers on the wall to alert me. I grabbed my glasses and shoved them on while saying "what" in my pissy voice. I looked up and it was just the back of him, but my glasses were caught in my ear. By the time I straightened them, he was gone. I got up and stomped out through the kitchen, and I could hear his buzzsaw snoring clearly in the bedroom. I went back to my room and double-checked the outside doors. I was scared, but I just tried to get my mind off of it. About 2 hours later, I get a text from my boy asking what I was talking about. My text was a bit angry about please stop messing with me because he knows I hate it. He was confused and a little freaked out, not enough to pick up on about hallucinating, but he did wait a day or two before he started that. I love reading these stories because, like, I blind react to them with you guys. I just, like, look up keywords, and I always get so much more than I think I'm getting because that was, like, a full haunted house story as well. That was fantastic. Okay, well, that is all for today, I guess. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, and please remember to only look at the trees, not in them.